Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here. One great show for you today. We have Senator Dave McCormick from the state of Pennsylvania. Ty McCoy, the former Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, the former Speaker. Kevin McCarthy on what's going on in America. Andrew McCarthy, Lynn Shaw, worried about our children. Dr. Peter Michalos, live long and prosper. And now let's find out what the heck is going on in the world. We have General David Petraeus. With us today is General David Petraeus, and United States Army and CIA Director. Well, General, what is your report to the American people?
Well, John, all eyes are on Pakistan right now, where the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is hosting our Vice President, J.D. Vance, and also Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and others, the American negotiators, with the Iranian team, which is headed by the Parliament Speaker, Ghalibaf, to see what the settlement can be negotiated to bring the war in the Gulf to an end. And I think it's paradoxical at this point that the U.S. has done a magnificent job, our men and women in the military, in degrading Iran's war-making capacity and even its military-industrial capacity to make components and assemble missiles and drones and the rest. All of that very substantially degraded. But they might actually emerge, the Iranians could emerge strategically strengthened if this negotiation can't produce an outcome that restores the Strait of Hormuz to open waters, international waterway, that can be transited without paying a tribute or a toll to the Iranians, which is the case right now. There is, I should note, an initiative by the U.S. Navy where a ship actually went through the main channel of the strait into the Gulf and then came back out again to the Arabian Sea. And apparently there is an effort to ensure that any mines that might be floating around in the main channel are removed. But so the paradox is that, again, depending on the outcome of the negotiations, Iran could emerge much weakened militarily, but strengthened somewhat strategically because they can control some export of some 20% of the world's crude oil and 20% of the LNG, even though, yes, there are paths to get some of that out. Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, the United Arab Emirates to a port in the Gulf of Oman, and so forth. So that's what everyone is watching now. And if that cannot be achieved, I think there is a possibility that the war resumes, and there is a very distinct focus on what would be required to try to wrest control of the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, which is a very challenging mission, given that it only takes a few mines or a couple of lucky drone shots or something like that to undermine the confidence that is necessary for the ships to begin moving again the way they have in the past. And keep in mind that this is not about risk insurance for those ships or underwriting that in some way. This is about the confidence by those who own the ships and those who own the cargo on those ships that they will not lose crew members, as has been the case. There have been some crew members lost already because of Iranian attacks in and around the Gulf.
There's been reports also that the Lebanese Prime Minister is coming to New York today, Sunday, to meet with Israeli. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I have. Yeah, the original report that I heard was that it was going to be there were going to be negotiations between the Lebanese ambassador to the U.S. and the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Apparently, that delegation is going to be beefed up by the prime minister, and of course, you have a president in Lebanon as well. So this is the head of the parliament. If that's an accurate report, the bottom line though is that there is an effort ongoing by the Israelis to meet with and discuss with the Lebanese government really their desire, which is to get the Lebanese armed forces to disarm Hezbollah once and for all, at the very least to control the area between the northern border of Israel and the Litani River. Israel really would like to continue the war against Hezbollah, frankly, and that's a problem as well because Iran, by its control of the Strait of Hormuz, can actually influence events elsewhere outside the immediate neighborhood, in this case, Israel's continued campaign against Hezbollah, by threatening to keep the strait closed. And that will put pressure on President Trump. And you've seen that President Trump asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to dial it back in Lebanon. At some point, it may be that they have to actually ask Israel to stop altogether, although Hezbollah continues to shoot missiles and rockets and drones and so forth into Israel itself. So keep in mind that this is not a negotiation with Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in southern Lebanon. This is a negotiation with the government. And let's recognize that the government doesn't really control Hezbollah. It can have conversations with Hezbollah. And in the past, there have been agreements fostered through this kind of arrangement. But the real objective here by Israel is to not just degrade Hezbollah even more than they already are, and keeping in mind what was done to them in the past as well, but really to try to have Hezbollah disarmed once and for all. And the use of force, the legal use of force in Lebanon rests with the government security forces, not with a militia supported by Iran. But that's a very, 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 very significant task. And I'm not sure that the Lebanese armed forces will feel capable of doing this. And of course, there's always the worry that they could plunge the country back into some kind of civil war, in this case between the Sunni and Shia, and see where the Christians fall out on that as well.
So the negotiations are continuing in Pakistan. It's going to continue until tomorrow, you feel?
Yeah. I mean, the early reports is that these are ongoing, and we've yet to see any kind of indication. I suspect this is going to take some time. Again, the Iranians are really quite good at dragging out negotiations, at having the last word, the last edit, you name it. And historically, these kinds of negotiations have actually taken years, not just months, much less days or weeks. I suspect that there will be enough progress in the eyes of President Trump in the first couple of weeks to extend the negotiations, because keep in mind, this is a 2-week ceasefire right now, to extend that further. And then we're going to have to see how willing Iran is to negotiate on the 10 points that it put forward were laughable. The U.S. would leave the Middle East altogether. It would allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz, essentially turn it into its Panama Canal and charge tolls for it. We'd pay reparations. We'd lift the sanctions on Iran and the secondary sanctions on those who do business with Iran, and a variety of other, frankly, absurd demands that cannot be accepted by the U.S. And also the right to continue to enrich uranium, which, again, is also a non-starter. So we'll see what they're willing to negotiate, and then how resistant they are to being really flexible. And that's going to determine what happens at the end of the time, where you see whether they're really open to negotiation or not.
I guess we take it day by day, hour by hour, and see what happens.
We do, and if I could, John, I might just offer quickly that I just got back from Ukraine. It was my 10th trip since the full-on invasion. I got back at late Sunday night, and I have to say that I was quite heartened by what I saw, not really on the front lines, because you can't go to the front lines. It's just too dangerous. Even the commanders can't go all the way forward to see their troops in the front lines. It's a death zone. But what I learned sitting in command posts of units with forces on the front lines, and then command posts of drone units that are carrying on the fight on the front line, because this is largely a fight of unmanned services with very limited numbers of operations on the ground involving humans. But it appears that with the onset of the good weather, so Russia can no longer attack given the cover of really foul winter weather, which is the only time that the ubiquitous surveillance is not perfect. It appears that they are able to halt the advance of the Russians, stopping them just about cold. And the price they pay is extraordinary. They're now losing and having seriously wounded more soldiers each month than it appears Russia is able to recruit. And that's a very important achievement. Keep in mind that the Russians have lost now around 1.35 million killed and wounded. And that is more than the U.S. military lost in all of World War II. The casualties are enormous, especially on the Russian side. So on the ground, on the front lines, there's real encouragement. At sea, the Russians still have their entire fleet tied up in a port as far from Ukraine as they can get. And Ukraine has now several times gotten into that port with drones. Drones either launched from maritime systems or long range or what have you. The continued problem for Ukraine is actually not intercepting Russian drones. They're doing that spectacularly well. Also, they have a tremendous common operational picture that is a product of very good acoustic sensors that are very effective against low-flying drones, and then radars that are very effective. And you put that together, and then they have very skilled pilots who are essentially dogfighting with these drones and try to take them from behind. Then they're taking out about 90% of the Russian drones that come at them on a given day. The challenge, though, is the missiles. And just as in the Gulf, there's just a limited number of missile interceptors. And they did get a shipment of them this past week when I was there, which was encouraging. And they get them, of course, from the Europeans, not just only the Americans. But that's the remaining challenge, really. And Russia continues to use missiles pretty effectively against Ukrainian infrastructure. During the winter, you'll recall they tried literally to turn off the lights and turn off the heat, and almost did that. Now the weather is much nicer. That's not the concern. Now it's just the other infrastructure that is critically important to Ukraine, including, again, this is very clearly civilian infrastructure, not that which just supports the military. But the overall skill of the Ukrainians, both in terms of operating systems and in terms of designing and manufacturing them at massive scale. They're going to produce 7 million drones this year alone. And again, we probably won't even approach 1 million, if that. So what they're doing is absolutely remarkable. And when the guns fall silent, this will be the arsenal of democracy for the Western world for a good period of time.
And I guess the step after that, General, it sounds like it's going to be robots, just like Terminator 1.
Well, it'll be autonomous systems. In fact, you may recall I had a piece in Foreign Affairs magazine about 3 or 4 weeks ago that talked about the coming age of autonomous warfare. So right now, the limiting factor for drones is the number of pilots that you have. They're remotely piloted. But when you go algorithmically piloted, these systems become truly autonomous, and they execute the commands that have been translated into an algorithm, a program, all kinds of limits, tasks, etc. But then you can use drone swarms, and that'll be the next challenge that is out there. In fact, I have a piece that will come out, I think, in the Wall Street Journal in the next few days that talks about, look, our men and women did magnificently against Iran, but the real test case is what's going on in Ukraine. And we have not sufficiently learned from that yet all that we should. And we really need to go to school on that and to anticipate what is coming, which again is going to be autonomous systems. And then at some point, John, autonomous systems of systems, where it is fully autonomous from the sensors to the shooters, all guided, if you will, by what the commander has issued in terms of instructions, but which are then translated into algorithm. And that's how it all works. So there are a lot of challenges down the road, and we've really got to accelerate our response. I'm really heartened to see some of the items that are in the new defense appropriation request, because we really need to change how we do business, including with our procurement.
General, thank you so much, and let's talk again real soon.
Likewise, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Today is Greek Easter. With us today is another Greek, Dr. Peter Michalos, and live long and prosper. How are we going to live longer, Dr. Peter?
Well, John, today we're going to talk about a really fascinating topic. And, all I always say is God bless America, because all the cutting-edge research is coming out of the United States, and we're really learning a lot more about our health and how it affects cancer and other diseases. And we know that 80% of our immune system is in our gut. But a fascinating 2026 study the other day came out of Johns Hopkins, and they found that certain bacteria, one of them it's called Fusobacteria nucleatum, and basically that bacteria, when you have poor gum health, it travels through the blood and it's associated with breast cancer. And that's completely, it's wild when you think about it, that they found these bacteria that are found in the oral microbiome, and they travel through the blood, they get to the breast tissue, and these microbes trigger inflammation, which causes DNA damage, and it promotes the spread of tumor cells. And they also found that women who have the breast cancer gene mutation called BRCA, the BRCA-1 gene, those women seem to have the ability to attract and retain more of that bad bacteria. And that same bad fusobacteria that's found in the mouth when you have gum disease or poor oral health, it also was associated with colorectal cancer. And they also found some other bacteria that were associated with squamous cell carcinoma and even pancreatic cancer, which is also fascinating, that the oral microbiome, and when there's an imbalance, affects things like cancer. We've already talked about things like P. gingivalis is a bug that's associated with more Alzheimer's disease. That's why dental cleaning, dental health is extremely important. And, I try to do
you
it
talked about a couple weeks ago,
Doctor,
you talked about a couple weeks ago on the toothbrushes that we should be careful of, and there might be better alternatives.
Yeah, well, we talked about microplastics and trying to buy the bamboo type of toothbrushes. The other thing is to try to use prebiotic toothpastes that feed the good bacteria. And I alternate between two types of toothpaste, one that actually binds plaque and actually has been shown to reduce like 80% of the plaque. And then I alternate in the same day with a prebiotic toothpaste to try to feed the good bacteria. And all these bacteria, they actually put out odor. They also produce things like bad breath. And that's why another future thing that we'll be hearing about is there's a company that's doing breath analysis, and right here on Long Island, called Rua Diagnostics, and it basically measures the different gases that the bacteria put out, and they claim that they're going to be able to now diagnose colon cancer and things like COVID and things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because we put out hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide gas, and if we can measure those gases, imagine you don't even have to go for a blood test. You breathe into a machine, and you'll be able to get diagnosis of various diseases. And again, this is the pioneering stuff that's changing. And we now know that, there's trillions of organisms inside our gut, and tumors grow when there's an environment of inflammation. And also we found that some bad bacteria, they put out these metabolites that damage DNA, that generates an immune inflammatory response, DNA damage, and that's how you end up with problems. So eating a good, healthy diet with prebiotics, and we talked about the good things like avocado and olive oil and salads and green leafy vegetables and beets and having clean fish, all these things that feed the good bacteria will help keep that balance. And in the future, we're going to get these gut health tests, and they're going to tell us which foods exactly we should be eating, which probiotics to take to feed some of the good bacteria, like, for example, Akkermansia is a good bacteria, and pomegranates and blueberries, they feed and they help some of the good bacteria. So we're going to learn more about this, but this study that showed that the bacteria go to the breast is fascinating. And they also found in heart plaques and heart disease that people with more gum disease tend to have more heart problems. And they've actually found in the plaques, when they biopsied them, they found these plaques in heart disease and strokes. So we're going to learn more about how to improve our gut, and in the future we're going to be going in for these tests like breath analysis and gut microbiome tests and even oral microbiome tests, and then they're going to tell us what we need to do to help improve the diversity of the good bacteria.
Dr. Peter Michalos, medicine is moving at warp speed, and if we keep up with it and our listeners keep up with it, maybe we have a good chance of living a few years longer.
Absolutely, John, and we appreciate that we always get the truth out to help our listeners live longer and prosper.
Thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you. Happy Greek Easter, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thank you, John, for always getting the truth out on the Cats Roundtable.
The Cats Roundtable.
And with us today is Senator Dave McCormick from the state of Pennsylvania. Well, Senator, I talked to you on Friday. We talked about a lot of things. There's a lot of things we missed. One of the things I know you're emotional about, can we make America drug-free?
Well, thanks, John, for having me. And this is something that I really feel very, very, very important to me and to Pennsylvania, which is fentanyl. And that's, of all the drugs that we've got to get control of, fentanyl is far and away the worst. And in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, during the Biden years, in part because of the open border policy, we were losing, by 2024, 4,000 Pennsylvanians a year to fentanyl, most of them kids, almost 100,000 nationwide. This is unbelievable, John. You go back to the Vietnam War, where over the course of 7 or 8 years, we lost 52,000, 53,000 killed in action. We lost 2 Vietnams in 1 year. That's how bad this was. And the president has done everything we could have hoped. He secured the border. He's used our military, which I supported from day one, to go after these cartels, the drug boats coming out of Venezuela, but also the cartels across the Mexican border. He's put pressure on China to stop sending these prefactors of fentanyl into Mexico. FBI and drug enforcement and our local prosecutors have gone after these drug lords and really made a huge difference. And so I had the FBI director to come to Pennsylvania last week. He was my guest in the Lehigh Valley around Allentown. And here's what we found. 4,000 fentanyl deaths in Pennsylvania in 2024. In 2025, preliminary numbers, 1,600. It's down more than 60% because of the policies and the great work of law enforcement up and down the chain. And that 1,600 is 1,600 too many, but we're making real progress. And if you've ever sat with a family that lost a child to fentanyl, it's like someone reaching down your throat and pulling your heart out. We've got to stop this poison. And thanks to the president's efforts, we're making real progress on it. We got a lot of work to do. And during that press conference, we had the FBI director there. We had 3 fentanyl families who spoke about their tragedy and how they hoped that their tragedy would help others understand this poison and do something about it, which is what we're doing.
Senator, I just don't understand some of our Democratic friends. They're fighting us on shooting down those boats full of drugs that kill our kids.
And the thing that you realize is that this is very much just opposition to Trump. Let me give you an example of that. The operation into Venezuela was a remarkable operation. This was 2 hours on the ground. In the middle of Caracas, they snatch Maduro, who is a federally indicted criminal, and the Democrats were in opposition, violation of the president's constitutional authority, just outraged. So go back in time, and this is why it was directed to Trump. Go back in time. I was in the 82nd Airborne Division when the 82nd Airborne Division did a similar operation. I was not on the ground for this, where they went into Panama, put 15,000 troops on the ground. There were a number of killed in action American soldiers. It took 14 days to get Noriega out of to find him and get him out of the Papal Embassy, of the Pope's embassy in Panama. And the Democrats in the House and the Senate universally applauded President George H.W. Bush's efforts. Democrats applauded it. It's exactly the same scenario, and Democrats are universally opposed to it, despite the kids that are getting killed every day, because it was Trump doing it.
Our military did a great job in Iran. Does China and Russia have a new respect for our military?
Listen, the one thing that we had lost, we've had the most superior military in the world forever, but what we saw on display was just remarkable. And I was in the Gulf War, which was viewed as, the most successful, I think, war in modern history. 6 weeks on the ground, universal success over Iraq. And what we've done in Iran is far greater in scale and scope, no casualties, or less casualties rather, and only 13 killed in action, which 13 horrible deaths, but compared to the Gulf War, many hundreds. This was an amazingly successful military operation directed at a illegitimate regime that had reaped terror for decades, and the president was incredibly clear on the objectives. So this is a supremely successful military operation. And now the Iranians face a choice in these negotiations, which are ongoing, on whether they're going to give up enriched uranium, give up their path to a nuclear weapon, and hopefully we'll find a peaceful resolution, or whether they're going to continue to insist on that, and we should be very skeptical of anything they say. And, I just applaud the president's strength in making sure that we eliminate this threat. Just imagine, John, a world where Kamala Harris had been president and Iran had 3 more years of building up their ballistic missile capabilities and 3 years closer to a nuclear weapon. That missile that got dropped on Diego Garcia, 2,500-mile missile that they insisted they didn't have, that could have a nuclear warhead on it in a couple years. That is what the president is saving our kids from, and I applaud his efforts.
We're out of time, but that's where another discussion we need in the future, maybe next week, is NATO. Me and you, I think, are very disappointed in our allies.
Totally disappointed. I mean, and your listeners should be clear. What we were asking NATO countries, we were asking them for overflight, and we were asking them the ability to refuel. We weren't asking them to put French boots on the ground in Iran, and they disappointed us beyond belief. It was disgraceful. These are countries that, we put American young men into the beaches of Normandy to protect, and NATO was the outcropping of that, and they're not doing the most basic level of support for us. They have their own domestic politics, but this is absolutely unacceptable. And I think NATO plays a very valuable role. There are members of NATO that are incredible partners, some that are terrible partners. I think we're going into deep marital counseling. I hope it's not going to end in divorce, but we got to make sure they know that the relationship has to come back into balance.
Well, Senator McCormick, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment.
I came here looking for something.
And with us today is the former Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. And Kevin, I just wanted to look, I always respected your opinion. A lot of people respect your opinion.
Well, I will, as we look what's going around the world and others, here's the Democrats with a world not as safe as we all would like it, still shutting the Department of Homeland funding down. We've got Olympics coming in a couple of years. We got the World Cup. And they're just playing politics with the worst extent that I can see. Not caring about the American people. Congress and Senate is out. Why it's the longest shutdown, thanks to the Democrats. And then we've got the situation, hopefully we'll be able to get to an agreement in Iran on, we've got at the table. I think it was smart not allowing them to have a nuclear weapon. We got to make sure that we get that uranium and they don't control the strait. The younger generation will be safer for it. We did it without putting troops on the ground. I think that was smart. And then we're looking at the elections coming up. But I think the Republicans are going to have to work harder if they want to keep the majority in the House.
No, I agree with you on that. And it seems, well, we had a good win. Where was it last week in, was it Georgia?
Georgia. Marjorie Taylor Greene's old district. It was a good win, and he's a good candidate. He'll make a good member. And you can't misread into the special elections, because special elections, it's usually, look, Democrats think they have some victory and they lost. If you lose, you lose in that basis. But we're going to have much more competitive seats than seats in Georgia, in New York and California. And you watch what the Democrats have done with this redistricting. What Gavin Newsom did in California, I believe, is unconstitutional, shows he doesn't care about the voice of the American people, definitely not his own voters in California. When they put into the Constitution to have a bipartisan commission, he went in and just played politics because he wants to run for president.
In California especially, things are a mess over there. I just don't understand it. With Illinois, in Illinois, things are a mess over there. Have these people taken too much COVID medicine? I don't understand what's going on with these Democrats.
Well, it just shows what Democrat policies will get you. High homelessness, high taxes, high inflation, high gas prices, and this is their policy. When you look at why people are moving to Florida, to Tennessee, and you look at those states that are run, and Texas, run by Republican policies and Republican ideas, there's low debt, the low gas prices, a lot of opportunity for jobs. They're speaking with their feet, and it really goes to show. And you'll see when the next census and we have the next redistricting, which states will grow in numbers and which ones are going to lose. And it really comes down to the policies of freedom and opportunity.
Understood. It's just I can't believe this is going on in our country, and it just maybe I'm getting too old, and I remember the days where Democrats and Republicans argued all the time, but they loved America more than arguing with each other.
There's one part that we kind of have lost in this country. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. There's nothing wrong with debating an opinion, arguing about an opinion. What's wrong is when you stop respecting the other person's opinion. And it really seems that we have come that way. And that's not helpful for the country. We're going to celebrate 250th anniversary, the longest republic and democracy in the world. And we really are a beacon for the rest of the world. We really understand that the greatest strength of America is the idea of America. And when you respect someone else's opinion, it does show the rest of the world how you should govern and how much freedom it brings.
Agreed. And common sense has to come back to America. Maybe it's going to take a big loss for the Democrats to come back to common sense and get rid of the Democratic Socialist Party. It looks like they're almost taking over the Democratic Party. What year was it that they lost 49 states?
Well, that was 1984, and the only state they won was Minnesota. Their nominee was from Minnesota, Mondale, and they only lost it by the Republicans. Reagan only lost it by a few thousand votes. Think about that. Hawaii, New York, Illinois. They were voting because they saw the great contrast from the Democratic policies of Carter, and those policies have come back with Joe Biden. And we watched President Trump win the popular vote again, win all the swing states. And that was really coming down to the policies of having a secure border, economics, and making the world and America a safer place.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for coming on. By the way, it happens to be Greek Easter, so I'm celebrating, but I'm working. And thank you. Thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for our country.
Thank you.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Andrew McCarthy, former Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and he's a columnist also for the National Review. Right now, we're almost 6 months away for the November elections, and we have this new SAFE Act. There's big opposition from the Democratic Party.
Well, I have a little bit of a different take on this. I think, like most Americans do, that it's absolutely essential that we try to protect our election system by making sure that only Americans can vote, whether it's in state elections or federal elections. A lot of people say that, well, if it's state elections, it should be up to the state to decide who gets to vote. I think that's wrong. I think, there's lots of law for the proposition that if you let people who are illegally in the country vote, whether it's in a state election or a local election, it dilutes the vote of the people who are legitimately American citizens living here and entitled to vote. My concern is twofold. One is it's already illegal in the United States for people who are not legally entitled to vote to either register to vote or to actually vote. Both of those things are felony offenses of federal law. And I think in a lot of the debate publicly about the SAFE Act, what people are being led to believe is that, we have no recourse against people who violate the law by voting when they shouldn't. In point of fact, we have a lot of law that we already have on the books that we could use if the Justice Department were willing to, enforce it vigorously. Those people, if we find that people are voting who shouldn't vote, they should be prosecuted. The thing I really worry about is the Constitution puts states essentially in charge of voting. It gives Congress some ability to regulate the conditions for voting, and they have done that by, for example, passing these laws that make it illegal for people who aren't entitled to vote. But mainly it's a state thing. And what I'm very concerned about is if you now take a position that Congress should change the voting procedures in every state across the country, what's going to happen is if the Democrats take over Congress, they have some very wild and radical ideas that they would like to impose on states in connection with voting. And if we have set the precedent that Congress can set the voting conditions for the states in a uniform blanket way, I'm very concerned about where the Democrats will take that.
But I don't understand how the Democratic leadership is not following what their people are wanting.
Yeah, this is a problem across the board. I find it very frustrating because I think there's a big difference, John, between the rank and file Democrats across the country that we know who are, highly reasonable people who love the United States as much as, conservative Republicans like to think they love the United States. But I also think that the base of the Democratic Party, the leadership, where the money and the energy is coming from, is very left-wing progressive and is not representative, I don't think, of the attitudes of most Democrats in the country. Because that's where the politicians need to go to get nominated. That's the class of people that they need to impress in order to be able to run for office and to function in office. It has pulled the party to a pole that's remote from where most Democrats in the country are. And I think it's a big reason why you probably know these sort of numbers better than I do. I think it's not so long ago that over 40% of people in the country were registered Democrats. Democrats had a huge advantage in the country in terms of voter registration. It's now down to 27%. So I think it's really hurt the Democrats by making their party less appealing to more people. There are many more people in the United States today who identify themselves as independents than as Democrats, and that's a big change in the last 20 years or so.
What else you want to get off your chest?
I have to say I'm concerned about where we're going with the ceasefire. I just think that it's very important for the Trump administration to hold strong on the American principle that we have freedom of the seas. We've done a very good job. Our military has done a spectacular job of setting back Iran's ballistic missile program and their nuclear program, and the way that they can threaten the world, really, with the way that they control jihadist proxies, especially in the Middle East, but also around the world. But it's an essential American principle that the seas are free for trade. And if you're in international waters, that no country gets to toll international waters, and no country gets to control it or tell traders that they can't navigate the seas. And it's important to keep that principle. And what I worry about is if we cut a deal where we allow the Iranians effective de facto or de jure control of the Gulf of Hormuz, the next thing that we're going to hear is that the Chinese have decided they want to do it in the Gulf of Taiwan. And then that becomes a huge geopolitical problem to the United States.
Andrew McCarthy, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for your wisdom, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us is Ty McCoy, former United States Assistant Secretary of the Air Force. And, Ty, where the heck are we?
Well, John, it's great to be with you, great to join the show. And I think where we are now, that's bubbling up across the board everywhere in the world, it's making it difficult for people to just adapt and understand what the strategy is on their own side, particularly on the United States side, is that the technology is advancing and accelerating. It's not just going at a high velocity, but it's accelerating. It also, the technology that's coming up from everywhere, including AI, quantum, cyber, space, and other things, biotechnology, drones, is that it's easier to discover new technology. The metrics and the things that you can use to discover new technology, they're accelerating. The technology to proliferate the technology to send that advancing technology more quickly out to the rest of the world is accelerating over things like the internet, theft, and so forth. The technology ability to absorb technology on a mass scale, such as in Ukraine with drones and so forth, that's also very, very strong. So things are moving to absorb, discover, and move things forward so quickly that it's upsetting what had previously been normal calculations of plus and minus and power and so forth. A lot of that technology is being misused. There's a lot of theft. There's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of danger as it accelerates. And technology now is almost considered more vital as an asset, a national asset, in some cases more important than land, water, food, people, money, weapons, fuel, housing. It's really become such a critical component as a vital crown jewel of national power and national survival. And as Darwin, the famous Darwinian philosopher and scientist, said, the species that can best adapt will be the one that survives. So those nations that can adopt and adapt this very rapid acceleration of technology, understand it on a mass scale, will be the ones that can perhaps survive. As we see now, the two main contending groups in the world, the axis of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. China wants Taiwan, Russia wants Ukraine, Iran wants Israel destroyed, and us probably, and taking over the Middle East, and North Korea wants to take over South Korea. They're very aligned on their side on that. Our side, between NATO, the U.S., and other countries, are not so aligned. We're bickering. We're having problems with each other. People are not supporting each other back and forth and understanding that they need to support each other. So we have the technology, the freedom, and the economic power, but the bad guys have the strong ideology and dedication to that technology and ideology, and they have central control. And they are very powerful, even though we're more powerful in many ways. Those components give them a lot of power that they're very able to orchestrate against us. So over time, it's really come down to who has the understanding that there is a fight on, and who has the will to fight and the will to win and the will to sacrifice for that will be determinative of which side is going to hold sway in the world and dominate the geopolitics in favor of either hostile forces or in terms of forces of the free world.
Are you disappointed what's going on with NATO?
Yes, I am. I think that they've taken a very selfish approach. They've taken a very narrow approach to their own interests. Their own interests have to be aligned with the United States because we have been the guarantor of their freedom. We have tens of thousands of Americans buried in cemeteries all across Europe that were buried there after World War I and World War II that sacrificed themselves. In the country, we sacrificed a lot of our domestic efforts and our economy to keep those countries free. And we have supported trillions of dollars in NATO to keep the Soviet Union from taking him over. So NATO has forgotten a lot of that, and they've become very soft and very self-serving. They can't even have a decent energy policy to protect themselves. They can't seem to do anything. And as a result, they're reacting to us as though we're the bogeymen of the world and we're the ones that are causing problems, when in fact it's their own weakness and their own inability to recognize that they have greater interests than just what happens to be occurring right next to their border, which in this case is Ukraine. We've helped them in Ukraine. We have worked with them closely to prevent the Russians taking over that country and dominating more of Europe. And when we needed their help, they were nowhere to be found. And I think there's going to be a very hard day of reckoning coming to them for that. That is sad because to the degree that NATO and the United States are not working together, then that creates a real chasm and a real weakness on our side. We need to try to remedy that. I'm not sure how we do because we can't boss those 32 countries in the EU around and the 28 countries in NATO. But we're just, President Trump is trying to wake them up and doing everything he can to make them recognize that they need to cooperate to protect the larger free world. So I think it's going to take some more strong language and strong efforts by the president and the U.S. to wake them up, to wake them from a slumber of many, many years.
Ty McCoy, thank you for the update, and let's talk again real soon.
We will. Thank you, John. God bless you and the good work you're doing.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Lynn Shaw, also known as Lynn's Warriors. Lynn, what are you doing this week?
First of all, we got to say, wake up, America. Silicon Valley has ruined our education system in the United States. Now, let me explain this. In the calendar year 2024, $30 billion was spent on putting screens into the classrooms. That's laptops, that's the Chromebooks in all of the classrooms pretty much across America. John, $30 billion. Yet, we now have the studies coming out, and we're seeing something that should stop us cold. We're going to talk about AI, your favorite subject, artificial intelligence. But what happened when these screens went into the classrooms, reading scores down, math scores down, but attention, cognitive attention collapsing. So we were told putting screens, we were told by Silicon Valley, all these big, great tech people, you know what, it will revolutionize education. It will help teachers. It will help the kids. It will help the parents. And it'll empower students. Sounds great, doesn't it? But what did it do? It engineered distraction at scale, and we're paying the price now, especially our kids, Gen Z, born in 1997. So they're basically like 29 and under. So now, just now, 2026, we're realizing what has happened. Where's everybody been, John? We're introducing now artificial intelligence. Have we learned nothing from all of this we're talking about? So the question is simple. Did we spend $30 billion in one calendar year making things worse? And are we about to double down? Because $30 billion, and we're slated in the next 5 years to spend $60 billion a year screens in the classrooms, but now we've got AI. So what are we going to do about all this? Look, the $30 billion actually represents a shift from books to screens. The idea was access equals the kids are going to do better, they're going to improve. But access without structure, without some guardrails on these screens creates distraction, not learning. And most kids are in the classrooms not using the screens academically. It's about 90% are doing other distractions, gaming and surfing, TikTok and all that stuff. So what we are seeing, we talk about it all the time, declines in student performance. Every state, K through 12, is faltering. Nobody is up to par in reading, math. But attention metrics, now this is the scary part, and a new study came out, it's great, by Dr. Horvath, that Gen Z is less cognitive than the millennials. So the group of kids, people before them, this is the first time in history this has happened, John. So we know screen life is affecting the learning. So screens are fragmenting attention. We know this, kids are swiping. The attention breaks, memory breaks. When memory breaks, it's very simple. Learning collapses. So distraction. So this is a major one. So what are we talking about? We're talking about cognitive offloading. It's very dangerous. Again, I always say our future American adults and leaders. So when kids stop thinking for themselves and rely on tools such as AI that'll be infiltrating shortly and is already into the classrooms, again, without a lot of parental consent, this will weaken even further the reasoning, critical analysis, critical problem solving, and independence. So what are we going to do about all this? We're going to say, first of all, AI is dangerous, yet kids are struggling more than ever. That's the rallying cry. And we always feel like the brain adapts. It's not adapting with this new AI and all this technology. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. So what are we going to do? Less screen time. We always say this to you. Ask your child's school how technology is being used, especially AI. Get in there. You're the parent. You have to know what's going on. Set boundaries around screen time at home. Encourage reading. Get back to a hardcover book. You go to the bookstore, you buy a book, you read it, you talk about it at the dinner table. Writing. Get your kids to write. Deep thinking. Get kids to ask questions. They're not asking questions anymore. They're just accepting this technology that the AI will give them the answer. And also be cautious about AI tools. They're here to stay. We're not going to get rid of them. We are pro-technology, but we want guardrails.
Somebody the other night was talking about newspapers are getting less and less, and there's nobody reading newspapers anymore.
Well, John, that's been gone for a while. I mean, the days of everybody was clamoring in the street corner to buy the Post or whatever paper you're buying. You're on the subway, and people leave it for the next person to read. That's been gone. This Gen Z, which is 1997 born, okay? These kids, they don't know from a newspaper. They didn't grow up with that. They're in the digital bubble that was thrown at them and thrown at the parents and thrown at society. Newspapers are done. The kids get their news mostly from TikTok and YouTube. That's where kids, young people get their news. So we have to say, is all of this, it's very simple. Did all of this technology, did it make it worse or did it make it better for our kids? And we can all say, it made it worse, and AI is here. So this is the problem right now. So remember, technology is shaping the future, but it's up to us as Americans to decide whether it strengthens our kids or weakens them. And AI must work for us. We don't work for AI. So we're demanding accountability, question the system, protect the kids, and empower your kids to ask questions. And that's what we have this week to talk about, artificial intelligence.
Lynn Shaw.
Be aware, yeah.
Thank you so much. And linswarriors.org.
That's it, linswarriors.org.
Thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you real soon again.
Thank you, John.
If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. Every Sunday morning, we'll bring you the latest in what's happening in our community, our country, and the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a nice Sunday.